Este viernes, 16º día de la invasión rusa en Ucrania, Rusia ha confirmado haber llevado bombardeos contra 2 bases aéreas ucranianas en las ciudades de Ivano-Frankivsk y Lutsk, situadas en el oeste del país, en el marco de la invasión iniciada el 24 de febrero por orden del presidente ruso Vladimir Putin. Esta noticia llega el mismo día en el que el presidente de Ucrania, Volodymyr Zelensky, ha informado del rescate de 40.000 personas por corredores humanitarios y ha denunciado que Rusia no ha cesado los ataques en Mariupol y Volnovakha. Por el momento, más de 1 millón de niños han huido de Ucrania desde el inicio de la guerra, según ha afirmado el Fondo de Naciones Unidas para la Infancia, que ha destacado que la mayoría han escapado con sus familias a Polonia, Hungría, Eslovaquia o Moldavia. En el ámbito político, los líderes de la Unión Europea han reconocido este viernes las aspiraciones de Ucrania a entrar en el bloque comunitario y han subrayado que es parte de la familia europea, prometiendo reforzar la relación con Kiev de forma inmediata. Pero eso sí, la señal llega después de que los líderes hayan descartado la petición de las autoridades ucranianas de acelerar el procedimiento de adhesión para ingresar en la Unión Europea por la vía rápida.
Попытки ограничить наше развитие, сдержать его, они предпринимались всегда, предпринимают и сейчас. Сейчас в большем масштабе, конечно, это очевидно, но уверен, что мы пройдем через эти трудности и наоборот, приобретем больше компетенций, больше возможностей чувствовать себя независимыми, самостоятельными. В конечном итоге пойдет на пользу, так как это было в предыдущие годы.
А я сейчас вам покажу, откуда на Беларусь готовилось нападение. И если бы за 6 часов до операции не был нанесен превентивный удар по позициям, 4 позиции, я сейчас покажу, карту привез, они бы атаковали наши войска Беларуси и России, которые были на учениях. Поэтому не мы развязали эту войну, у нас совесть чиста. Хорошо, что начали. Биологическое оружие, самые большие электростанции атомные. И все это было готово взорваться.
Попытки ограничить наше развитие, сдержать его.
Attempts to stem our development have always been taken, and there are attempts to do this now on a much larger scale, of course, and that's obvious. But I'm confident that we will overcome these difficulties and will gain more competences, more ability to feel independent and self-sufficient. Ultimately, this will only be useful, just like in the previous years. I will, of course, update you about the situation on Ukraine and, first of all, on the course of negotiations that are being conducted on a daily basis. There are some positive shifts, as I was told by our negotiators on our side. I will let you know all the details in a moment.
Well, our Moscow correspondent Diana Magnay joins me now. Diana, suggestions today that Moscow may bring in fighters from the Middle East.
That's right. President Putin held a meeting of his Security Council earlier this morning and discussed bringing in what he called volunteers from the Middle East to assist in the liberation, which is the way Russia puts it, of the people of Donbass. And his defense minister, Sergei Shoigu, said that there were already 16,000 of these volunteers in Syria and the Middle East who had suggested that they would want to come and engage in the fight, or special military operation, as Russia likes to call it. And we have seen some videos supposedly aired from Russia's Ministry of Defense of people who are keen to join. Dmitry Peskov, the Kremlin spokesman, was asked in his daily call what exactly that meant, that Russia had to be sure that there weren't any radicals amongst them. And he said there is a very big difference between those who fought radicals and those who are radicals, and it would clearly be those who fought them.
For 16 days, I know many people are feeling tired now. I understand it. I understand it's all about emotions, and it's life. When we mobilize our efforts and when we see that we can win, we expect the enemy fall quicker. But the truth is, this is the war, this is the fight. We need more time, we need more patience, we need to be wise, we need to do our job the best we can to gain the victory. We can't say how many more days we will need to take our land back, but we can do it because we want to do it. We already have strategic victory. We're already on the way to the victory. This is our patriotic war. They destroyed residential houses in Sumy region. They continue torturing Mariupol, Ivano-Frankivsk. They targeted this place as well. So they carry on their invasion, and that's why we require further, more rigid sanctions against Russia, because they must pay for what they do. Every day they must pay. European Union has to do more to implement a decision, to do more for Ukraine, for the European Union, for everyone. All European nations expect this to happen.
As we enter the third week of this conflict, General Sir Richard Barrons is with us. He's been monitoring what's been happening on the ground in Ukraine, and we are seeing the Russians slowly getting closer to Kiev. That convoy that we saw heading its way towards the capital is now dispersed.
So what we've seen developing over the last 10 days are Russian forces closing in on Kiev from the northwest and the northeast. Those forces are getting closer. They're moving off the roads into battle positions, and they're beginning to try to encircle the city.
And if we take a look now at a closer picture of the capital, we're saying this isn't going to be straightforward, is it? Because coming into an urban area is always difficult with fighting, particularly somewhere as big as Kiev.
So we need to understand this is a really big fight. This is a much bigger scale of challenge for the Russians than they've taken on so far. What we'd expect to see is that Russian forces approaching the city on a number of axes. And as they do that, their armoured forces will lead, so tanks in the front, and the Ukrainians will resist that. As they approach the edge of the city, the infantry will take charge and the tanks will follow, and it'll all be supported by massed and very destructive artillery. The Ukrainians are ready for that, and the resistance will be very stiff. So breaking into Kiev is going to be a massively difficult fight. And this is where the spectre of chemical weapons appears to be raised by Russia, because if the Russian assault stumbles or is stalled by the Ukrainians, one way they may elect to unstick that is by using chemical weapons against the city, with all the abhorrent effects that will have.
OK, and we've seen some developments northwest of Kiev, at Berestyano, where I'm circling now. I think we can show you some satellite pictures from there, which we think show rocket launches, and that obviously potentially is very concerning, because this is a place that is only 35 or so kilometres away from the capital.
So this is a very good illustration of the Russian forces coming off the road and deploying into battle positions. That looks like a battery of 6 rocket launchers in positions where they could fire, and they are now in range of Kiev. OK, and let's look now at the whole of Ukraine. What do you think we should be looking at in particular when it comes to the south of the country? So a lot of focus on Kiev, rightly so, right now, but there are at least 4 other things we need to look at. The first is the battle for Mariupol, because if the Russians take that city, they will complete the land bridge from Russia to Crimea, which has clearly been one of their main objectives. And over the last 24 hours, we've seen the first strikes on Dnipro. That suggests the Russians are inclined to move further into Ukraine and maybe close up to the river wherever they can. And then in the last 24 hours, 2 airstrikes way in the west of the country on airfields. That's never happened before, and that looks like strikes designed to wear down the Ukrainian Air Force. And finally, the expectation that the Russians will assault Odesa to complete the isolation of Ukraine from the Black Sea.
So these airstrikes are the furthest west we've seen airstrikes so far from the Russians. Thank you so much, General Sir Richard Barrons.
Thank you.
Our top story this hour, the issue of bioweapons being used in war in Ukraine has now reached the United Nations Security Council. An emergency meeting of the Council has been called today at the request of Russia, who alleges that the United States is funding research into creating bioweapons in Ukraine. Both the United States and Kiev had denied the allegations that said that this is a sign that Moscow could soon use the weapons itself. Western countries have in fact charged that this is ruse by Russia to lay the groundwork for using bio and chemical weapons in Ukraine, something Moscow has been accused of doing in Syria as well.
They accuse us, again us, that we are allegedly developing biological weapons. Allegedly, we are preparing a chemical attack. This makes me really worried because we've been repeatedly convinced. If you want to know Russia's plans, look at what Russia accuses others of. Look, spreading such accusations in the Russian media shows that it is they who are capable of this. The Russian military, the Russian special services, it shows that they want it. They have already done such things in other countries, similar. They themselves announced, they themselves complained, they themselves organized, and they will do so again, again and again, if they are not stopped.
This is a government that has used banned chemical weapons on its own people in the past. They've done so on Russian territory. They've done so on British soil. They have supported the brutal Assad regime, which itself has used banned chemical weapons on its people. So we know what this government will resort to, can resort to, has resorted to in the past. But the other element that gives us a good deal of concern is what we know about the Kremlin's tactics, especially its disinformation tactics.
The case of Russia using chemical weapons in Syria remains unresolved, but both Washington and London have raised the matter at a Security Council meeting on the issue. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson said that the allegations by the Kremlin are straight out the Russian playbook.
And I'll make you one other prediction, by the way, which is that the stuff that you're hearing about chemical weapons, this is straight out of their playbook. They start saying that there are chemical weapons that have been stored by their opponents or by the Americans, and so when they themselves deploy chemical weapons, as I fear they may, they have a sort of a masquerovka, a fake story ready to go. And you've seen it in Syria. You saw it even in the UK.
Russia has alleged that the United States was pouring millions of dollars to fund biolabs in Ukraine, at least 30 of them, in order to create bioweapons. The Defense Ministry said that the United States funded biolabs which were researching on how to spread deadly pathogens.
Особый интерес вызвала детальная информация о реализации США на территории Украины проекта по изучению переноса патогенов, мигрирующими между Украиной и Россией, другими соседними странами, дикими птицами. Согласно документам, американская сторона планировала вести на Украине в 2022 году работы по патогенам птиц, летучих мышей и рептилий с дальнейшим переходом к изучению возможности переноса ими африканской чумы свиней и сибирской язвы.
The World Health Organization, meanwhile, advised Ukraine to destroy high-threat pathogens that are housed in the country's public health labs. This in order to prevent any potential spills that would spread disease among the population. The risk of such a scenario have been raised as well. As Russian airstrikes and shelling continues indiscriminately in the country, like many other countries, Ukraine too has public labs studying how to mitigate threats of dangerous diseases affecting both animals and humans. Most recently, this also includes studying the COVID-19 virus. Its labs have received support from the United States, the European Union and the World Health Organization. And beyond correspondent Giles Gibson has sent us this report from Latvia. Let's listen in.
To the United Nations in New York is saying that it is calling this meeting of the Security Council to discuss military biological activities of the US on the territory of Ukraine. As you were saying just a minute ago, there was just an instant reaction to this from the US mission to the United Nations, describing these claims as laughable. We also have had the State Department in Washington weighing in on this, saying that Russia is inventing false pretexts in an attempt to justify its own horrific actions in Ukraine. I think a little bit of context that is also really worth noting here is that the World Health Organization has confirmed to the Reuters news agency that it told the Ukrainian government to destroy what it called high-threat pathogens that were being studied inside civilian laboratories. So things like COVID-19, like the coronavirus, being studied in civilian laboratories. There has been absolutely no evidence provided by Russia or anybody else that these military biological labs, these accusations that the US and the Ukrainians were working together on military activities, there is absolutely no evidence so far to support that.
WION is now available in your country. Download the app now. Get all the news on the move.
The situation in Odessa is there is now, as we've seen across Ukraine, the most remarkable effort by civilians to try to protect their beloved city here on the southwest coast of Ukraine. It is a critical target for Vladimir Putin. If he is able to capture Odessa, he will be able to cut off Ukraine from the sea. It is a critical seaport, and it is the beaches that are now being fortified by civilians to protect themselves from the might of the Russian army. Just have a look at this. In the summer, by the way, there's sunbathing and fun on these beaches. Today they're digging and digging, filling sandbag after sandbag to try to protect these beaches. It is the most remarkable effort in the most terrible, chilling weather. Let's just have a look around here. The several beaches across the coast here on the southwest coast of Ukraine. 350,000 sandbags have been filled by these people in the last 2 weeks alone. While they're doing that, well, they fear that out there in the Black Sea there is a build-up of Russian military and navy that have plans to try and mount some kind of amphibious assault on the beaches of Odessa. And the Odessans are not going to have any of it, they say. And so these sandbags are going to be put out across the coast here to try to prevent that from happening. The president of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, said that he has information that the Russians plan to attack Odessa just within the next few days. And if he's right, then this might just be able to stave that off. But it's hard to see how that can be possible. Just look at this effort. A human chain. Look at the weather. It's absolutely freezing cold, and yet they're still putting these sandbags on the back of these lorries and moving them to wherever they feel they can be beneficial. Now, we do know that Vladimir Putin has his sights set on Odessa. It's the pearl of the Black Sea. It's a hugely strategic port, and there's all sorts of activity going on up and down this coast. But here, right now, I have to say that it's quiet, and you could say eerily quiet. But there is some intelligence to suggest last week that some Russian Navy ships were spotted off the coast. It's a murky, windy day today, and you can't see any evidence of that. But what you can see is a huge effort to try and fortify the beaches here. Just behind me, in normal times, just a few weeks ago, this was a yacht club. In the summer, people come here, they have fun, they enjoy the coastline. And now look at it. You know, it's just the most remarkable effort being played out in front of us. In the town, they're building barricades almost on every street. The cafes, Odessa's famous for its really picturesque cafes. I was here about 5 years ago, sitting having tea in the square. Now it's completely deserted. Those big steel blockades, the hedgehogs, designed to stop tanks rolling through the city, they're almost on every corner, and there is a bit of a twitchiness in the air. But here on the coast, the sandbags are really the key. But it just makes you wonder just what and how effective they'll be against the might of the Russian military, who seem really dead set on taking Odessa. It really was the sort of jewel in the crown of the Soviet Union. And Vladimir Putin has big ideas about new Russia, and it would be hard to see Odessa not being a big part of that. And so they're doing all they can, and they're waiting for what might happen in the next few days. It's cold, it's windy, it's snowy, but it's not putting them off.